Research designs is a structured piece of research where you look at what the outcome is going to be and what type of research you want it to be, what type of research you want to be conducted. Then you also need to look at the research method where you decide what data is collected, what type of data needs to be collected, and what research design you're going to use to find the data you want. So one way of doing it is experimental research designs. This is where the researcher has to decide how they're going to use their participants in the research. Repeated measures is where the researcher uses the same subjects to be involved in each group. Disadvantages of this is known as order effect, which involves the subjects knowing what they're going to do and they're exposed to what might lead them to change their behaviour. However, advantages are by using the same subjects you can test over a period of time and see the change. Second one is independent groups. It's a design where you use two or more separate groups that contain different subjects, and each subject takes part in one condition once. Advantages of this is subjects can be randomly allocated different groups to show individual differences. Another one, there'll be no order effect, as the participants won't be exposed to different conditions more than once, unlike repeated measures. And then the third one is match pairs, where people will be allocated like another partner. Sometimes it's based on the same IQ, so they get similar results, and they'll have to they'll do one condition and then the other one will do the other condition, and they can compare the results. When you're collecting data from any type of research design, you need to see what type of data you're going to collect. Will it be primary or will it be secondary? Primary data is where the researcher collects the data that they specifically want for the research project they're going to do, and the secondary data is where the data was collected by someone else for their use. They both come with three advantages. They both come with their advantages and disadvantages, and this includes the primary data. It is direct, tailored to current research they want, so they know they'll get the results they're looking for. It's reliable, as a researcher is finding it out firsthand. However, disadvantages of this is the data is risk bias, because a researcher might only take note on the research they want rather than what they might be given. And it also can take more time, money, and it might be trial and error, as you might not find the data you want the first time. Advantages of secondary data is that it is available quick, and as you can use sources, you might find it in books or the internet. Also, it's inexpensive, as you're not having to hire any labs or spaces out. But disadvantages of this is that it might be insufficient detail, as you might get data you don't really want, and the variety and quality as people go in different quality and depth. Ways to measure levels of data is out of 5: discrete, nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Discrete data is where you use opposite values, for example, saying something like, do you enjoy gymnastics, yes or no? So it's just either yes or no. Nominal is where you use data which has name categories, therefore you can tally up the total and put it into categories. Ordinal data is where it's ranked in an order, for example, heaviest and slowest, but does not tell you the difference between the results that's what makes it more limiting. Interval and ratio is numerical data. Interval data can have minus values like temperature, whereas ratio has an absolute zero, for example, running speed, because you can't go minus something speed. There are 5 types of research designs: experimental, correlational, cross-sectional, case study, comparative, and longitudinal. A longitudinal design is where research is conducted at different time points in order to see how their variables change over a period of time. An example of this is looking at a gymnast at the start of their career and seeing how the change of flexibility levels over a decade. Experimental design is where the researcher assigns participants randomly to groups then they'll manipulate an independent variable to see the effect it has on a dependent variable. They'll also have a control group where no variables are manipulated in order to make a comparison of each result. A cross-sectional design is a research what examines different cross-sections of different populations. The aim of this is to identify different relationships between the populations and see the different characteristics. And then lastly, a case study is a design technique which involved a detailed investigation of an individual or a single case like football team and aimed to analyse the data, make a theory based on the results they got. So data can be collected in two ways, and the first way is qualitative data. Types of qualitative data is observations, interviews, and interviews can get structured, semi-structured, unstructured, and focus groups. So it's more like a written-based kind of way of doing it. Firstly, observations is where behaviour is observed or recorded, usually with no deliberate manipulation. And this is in a setting where it's natural. The role of the research is the observer, and basically different ways the researcher can have a role in it. So they can participate as well and be an observer. They don't need to participate and be an observer, or they're disclosed and undisclosed, where undisclosed is where the participant knows what's happening and discloses where they don't. And the structure of this is descriptive and numerical, coding specific. And also you have over is where you're observing a subject and they don't know they're being watched, and covert is when they do know they're being observed. Reliability levels is difficult to replicate, so maybe a bit low. You can have confounding variables, and good coding can increase reliability because it's made clear. Validity is the participant knows, maybe, and it could be risk to observer bias. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are that the observer can happen in a more the observation can happen in a more natural environment when the person who is being conducted might not realise they're being observed. Another advantage is that it's easy to observe a group of people in one setting rather than just having to concentrate on one person. Disadvantages is that it can take quite a lot of time to have to watch someone and see their behaviour. Also, when someone is observing another individual, the observer will have an idea on what type of data they want to receive. Therefore, there could be risk for observer bias, as they might only note down the behaviour they want to see. Next one is structured interview. This is where the interviewee will already have a set list of questions they want to ask the person they're interviewing, and if they were to ask a number of people, they would use the same questions they made each time for the same people, different people. Advantages are you can get to the point straight away, so there's no faffing. You get the data you're looking for, and it's quick. You don't have to go off subject. Disadvantages are there isn't any room for the interviewee to go into more depth. So by going for them to go more depth, you might get more information that you didn't already plan, but actually is really useful, and it lacks rich in detail. The semi-structured is there'll be some structure to the questions, so maybe the person who's interviewing will have maybe a couple of starting questions or a couple of questions they know they want to ask, but they can let them go into a bit more depth with their answers, and maybe if they go into more depth in the answers and they see another question what might be useful, they can still ask them. So you can get some unexpected data. It can come from going a bit off task, and you're still able to build a rapport between you and the interviewee because you're not just asking them the questions, you're having a bit of a chat as well. Disadvantages are risk going off subject. If you go to a subject, you're not going to get the data you wanted, and you have to be able to still make questions up on the spot. The unstructured interview is there'll be an already made starting question, and then you'll make questions randomly what you think is correct, depending on what the participant's reply is. The advantages are you can find out more information than you thought you would, so it makes your study have more depth. Having open and closed questions is a good mixture, and unexpected data can come from it as well. Disadvantages are easy to go off subject and coming out with not the information you originally wanted, and focuses more on the participant's response. And if they don't have a good response, you need the skill to be able to make up questions so you know that you're going to get the data you really needed, and it can be more time consuming. Lastly, focus groups is a semi-structured type of question, but in a group-based environment where you're asking a number of people. Advantages are a quicker way to get information in a short period of time. People can feed off other people, which might mean they answer the questions in more depth, and it might trigger something what makes them remember information they need to say, and can compare people's body language. Disadvantages are people might change their answers to what they think might be correct in the group, and what other people they might be thinking about other people's opinions too much, and risk going off topic as a large group and it's semi-structured. The advantages of qualitative data overall is it provides rich detail, and you can see how people act, and it's got more feelings over it. Because doing observations, you really get to read body language and see their actions for it's just not just paperwork, it's more face to face. Disadvantages: the quality of research is heavily dependent on the skills of the researcher and can be easily influenced by personal thoughts. The second type of data collection is quantitative. Quantitative data is where you collect data using a numerical way and can be transformed into usable statistics to compare results. This is then used data which is measurable and then can be generalized and formulates facts and patterns. Types of data which can be used is laboratory-based experiment, field-based experiment, questionnaires and observations. Advantage observations is can read body language, you can video it and watch it back and analyse it and see the strengths and weaknesses, but negatives, misbehaviours and might need several observers. Questionnaires is you've got two types of questionnaires. You've got open questions, which are normally more qualitative, where you get more depth of detail in your questions, therefore is more the why. And closed questions are more simple and tend to be more quantitative, therefore the answers you get is normally a specific response. Examples of these type of questions would be how do you feel for qualitative questions and are you for more closed questions. When you're making a questionnaire, it's important to make sure you see what you want to find out and stay as objective as possible, and language you use depending on who is answering, so you'd adapt it depending on who the questionnaire is for. Advantages are people friendly, can reduce participant bias, anonymous and data is structured. Disadvantages is difficult to probe and follow up to responses, restricted to technical language and potential for low response rate.